Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to FinStep Asia Token Bites. We bring you founders, CXOs, and very interesting stories in the world of Web3 and FinTech. Seated today in the W Lab into the Do Asia's amazing space. They've been a partner of ours for many events and love the space, repurpose industrial space at the heart of Hong Kong's Quarry Bay district. More importantly, with me is a dear friend and a mentor when it comes to communications, Mr. Mark Leeper. He is the managing director and founder of Matrix Communication. Mark's been in the industry for a while and has seen the ups and downs of how the market's moved. For me personally, it's quite inspiring to see the way he has approached communication for various different businesses. And we'll talk more about how, even though technologies change, how communication fundamentals can probably remain the same. Mark, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Musheer. I'm doing fine, thank you.
Impending typhoons coming up.
That's
couple
right,
of them.
always
Yeah,
through Hong Kong in summer.
it's a late one, right?
It
We're
is,
expecting three,
yeah.
four after this. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of
Fun.
breezy fun, as it were.
Yes.
Mark, you've been in Hong Kong for many years now, right? You've seen different parts and shades of Hong Kong, probably from the time it's been a special administrative region, but it's also been the age of growth, diversity of Hong Kong as well. But would love to hear and the audience to know more about your career. What brought you to Hong Kong initially, but what's been the journey to becoming this PR and communications guru?
Well, thanks, Musheer. It's great to join you on the show, FinStep Asia. You're right, I've been here quite a long time, about 30 years, and seen a lot of changes through the handover and in business too. We've seen technology evolve from the days when I started doing PR with a tech PR company, and we worked with multinationals like Microsoft and Cisco, Yahoo. These big players used to come to Hong Kong, and it was all exciting because it was the foundation of tech in the late 90s. And things have moved on a lot since then. We've been through a whole new revolution, gone from Web 1 to Web 2 and now Web 3, and working a lot these days instead of large multinationals with startups, fintech startups, Web 3 companies, and other tech entrepreneurs.
And to that point, right? So you've seen from possibly the birth of, as you say, Web 2.0, right? The mid 90s is where the .com boom was, and then we kind of settled in the 2000s to slightly more, okay, everything is on the websites and internet-driven economy, and then the last 5 to 7 years has been the Web3 story.
Yes.
How have you seen that wave transition? What were some of the highlights for you in terms of certain things that were obvious in terms of maybe technology trends, and certain things that you feel were a bit of a surprise that popped up in the way they did?
Well, that's kind of a big question, but I think we moved from Web 1, which is a desktop-based innovation, and onto the internet itself, to Web 2, and then that came through the iPhone and other mobile devices. Then we had the big players evolve with Google and Apple, etc. And they maintain a certain level of centralized control. And that was kind of easy to relate to.
Sure.
I think for consumers and businesses, people build apps and market them through the App Store.
Yeah.
And everyone was reasonably comfortable with that. The downside is perhaps that it's dominated by several big corporations that make an awful lot of revenue. And to some extent, other companies didn't get much of a look in.
Yeah.
Web 3, which only started half a dozen or maximum 10 years ago, has seen a slower evolution, a gradual process, but it's also been, it makes a lot of potential change because as activities move to the blockchain, so ownership of data and the possibility of remuneration changes too.
Sure.
And that can potentially change the whole playing field for business and for consumers. But I would say we're still at a very early stage of this process.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know exactly where it's going, but it's an exciting path. And in fact, I'm lucky enough to be involved in this specifically because I've worked with Animoca brands for 20 plus years, and I've seen them go from a games company to a mobile games company, and most recently under Yat's visionary leadership, Yatsu, to a Web3 leader and a large unicorn billion-dollar corporation. So seeing this evolution, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in the whole process along the way. But I will say it's still a process underway.
Sure.
And right now, having seen how blockchain has developed to some degree, how applications and games have moved onto the blockchain, we're now seeing the traditional finance world jump on board, and we start to see the financification of Web3. And banks, as you know better than me, how assets are being put on the blockchain and starting to be marketed that way. And we can see massive potential in that, and also with stable coins and real world assets also on the blockchain too. So the potential here is supremely large, and it does, at least from my own point of view, cement the future of Web3. I think there was a doubt for a while in the last decade that Web3 might never really get established, and we might never get 1 billion users. But now with the process that's happening and the joining together of Web3 and the traditional finance market, I'm very comfortable, very convinced that we are going to see Web3 play a very big part in the future, and that is tremendously exciting.
Right, and I think that's a good point to be made, right? Web 1, Web 2 was a lot about users, consumers coming online, and connectivity was the key. And then you move from, say, okay, UX, UI, and then data became a major conversation, and real-time exchange, and to a certain extent, decentralization, almost a way back in time where everybody were owning and managing everything with themselves. And now that evolution has happened, as you rightly said, probably we saw the first step as financification of blockchain, but the last year in particular, and I mean the last week, my God, has been all about blockchainification of finance. And when we facilitated the conversation with Yat, where we had him on our podcast just a couple of episodes ago, we spoke a lot about that blockchainification of finance, stablecoins being one of those mediums. But I wanted to come to a point which I feel is very relevant, both from a communications perspective, but business model evolution perspective as well, right? That being, what we saw was a majority of the last decade was driven by startups and tech companies and blockchain companies and crypto firms who were new. Some of them very well funded. A few of them raised billions of dollars through ICOs or other means, but largely it was through a community-driven initiative or value appreciation of their token, right? But the last week, as I mentioned, beyond the first element of BlackRock saying we're going to do an ETF, all the way to the announcements that just keep coming this week, which is tokenization of stocks, tokenization of financial products, exchanges using DLT platforms such as LSEG, London Stock Exchange Group, using their own platform for markets, right? All the way to Franklin Templeton tying up with Binance for distribution of their products through a DeFi medium as such. And it just keeps going in some senses. What I mean by that is we're now seeing mainstream heavyweight finance come in, right? So what happens, and how do startups now deal with this? And allow me to just expand a little bit more, maybe. I draw parallels with the AI world, and it's been similar players, maybe to a certain extent. I mean, the latest announcement was Google saying they now have this agent-to-agent payment network leveraging blockchain, which people can use for a variety of different payment use cases. I was like, that's Google, right? We saw the same thing 2 years ago. It was all like ChatGPT, OpenAI, Perplexity, all tech companies. Yes, some of them massively backed, but the big names were not quite there. And you started seeing small companies coming up and saying, we can do this, we can do that, a wrapper on this, do your vibe coding, all of it. But the moment the big techs who spend tens of billions of dollars and have the capacity came into being, it became, this is Nano Banana free, right? This notebook LLM free, summarization of PDFs, which Adobe was offering to me for $30 or $40 subscription a month. I can just put it into ChatGPT and I can get it for free,
Right.
right? Through Copilot. So what I mean by that is once these big firms come in on a cutting edge technology, they bring in huge resources, technology,
Sure.
backing, and communication and PR because they grab all the sound bites, right?
Hmm.
So how should startups, especially in the Web3 and fintech space,
Hmm.
which is where you have seen evolve,
Yes.
how do they handle this, right? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well,
Yeah.
you make very good points, and thanks for that. I would say that, first of all, there are a lot more opportunities still for small startups to prosper
Mm-hmm.
in this evolving marketplace. For example, with AI, then the whole idea of introducing AI agents to handle specific tasks, whether it's booking a holiday or finding a medical solution to a medical problem,
Yeah.
we'll see, I believe we'll see AI agents develop with specific skills to handle these issues for you as an individual, and they will be developed by individual startup companies. And they will launch services just like in the past. We've seen services launched in Google Play and the App Store.
Correct.
And so we will, I believe, see a very healthy marketplace of startups continuing, and that's exciting for all of us in marketing and communications. And for me also, I believe that the marketplace in communications remains the same. Despite all the changes in technology, you're still going through the same process to plan your marketing and communications plan.
Sure.
And one of the things I'm looking forward to talking about today is explaining how entrepreneurs and founders, CEOs of small startup companies who are challenged in terms of budget and time,
Yeah.
how they can roll out a communications program fairly simply and easily with a bit of careful thought and some focused resources and make it effective.
Would be a good segue to that. I would love to hear your thoughts
Okay,
on that. Yeah.
I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean. Basically, today you've got a choice of several different channels. You have owned media, you have paid media, and earned media.
Yeah.
So owned media is all about your website, your newsletter, your social media channels, which is the way you communicate to your existing marketplace, your partners, your investors, your customers. With paid media, it's about advertising, and often these days it's mainly through social media channels.
Sure.
And then with earned media gives you the capacity to reach out to a much wider audience using PR and media relations through expert channels, because every business area has vertical market communications media online, and then through business channels and broadcast. And that's the area which offers the most potential with a strong lower cost element to it. And what we would recommend is hiring a PR agency to manage that process. And so with a small team within a startup organization, with a couple of people, it's possible to manage the owned, paid, and earned channels very effectively with a limited budget.
And I think you make a very good point about, like, say, own media. Like, I mean, this is the case for us, right? I looked at our means and what we can do as an individual or as a small company was a leverage of the social media of the founders, which in this case is me. So using my LinkedIn, but then again also leveraging of the access that the founders may have to other people and thought leaders or business leaders or clients, etc., to then run joint sessions, videos. It could be other elements which add brand building without having to spend considerable dollars. And I think partnerships as such for PR and communications is very under noticed, undervalued.
Sure, certainly. Podcasts like FinStep Asia, I mean, you have the opportunity to develop that as a channel that founders can use to share their message coherently and also to practice their messaging, because they don't always have the opportunity to talk to an industry expert like yourself and project the message to a broader audience. So FinStep Asia, is one of the examples of a media channel that startups can use very efficiently.
And what I mean is, it's also about startups partnering with others in their ecosystem. So it could be, for example, if somebody is F&B startup, right? They could then partner with somebody who's in parallel, maybe a a bar or a restaurant and then do a joint session or an
Mhm.
event, whatever that helps amplify
Mhm.
the message. Or
Absolutely.
it could be interestingly looking at people who are in the KOL space. This is a whole new world, right? In
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
last 10
Mhm.
years or more, is a key opinion leader online. I mean, we didn't have social media managers 10 years ago,
That's right.
largely,
Yeah.
and or KOL managers and things like that. So, how are you seeing from that perspective? What are your thoughts on how companies can find partners, be it partner companies or be it individuals like KOLs? And would love to hear your thoughts on a best way to source partner with these influencers at the most economical way,
Um,
if at all.
well,
Yeah,
this I think is a little bit on the consumer side of the
sure.
marketplace. So um, it's a specific area. KOLs in Hong Kong in particular can be pretty expensive in terms of their fees. So you've got to be very selective and cautious and careful about who you choose to target because budget may go out the window if you choose the wrong
Correct.
people,
Yeah,
and they don't always carry the necessary interest or knowledge because if we're talking about tech
yeah,
startups and your KOL doesn't really know your market, perhaps he or she has a strong consumer audience,
yeah. Agreed.
it might not work well. It might not be authentic sufficiently. So you've got to be very careful about who you choose. Um, you need a particular social media agency support to manage that detail. And for me, especially, I don't do that kind of area myself, but I know people that do, and I'd call on their resources on the social media side. Typically, my focus is on core messaging for a business, helping drive the marketing message into communications plan. And from the core message, which is what you write in your business plan,
Yeah,
what you use in your sales channel, right?
yeah,
Every startup has these in their business plan when they raise money. So take the core message and then use that message and share it with the media, use it in advertising, use it in sales, and then let it trickle down through the social media channels on a regular basis. That way, you have your outreach and you broaden your audience from a core close audience of
yeah.
customers, investors, and users and reach out to new marketplaces, which is what you can do very well through media, which, as everything has changed and gone online, we now look at the internet-based media.
Yeah.
And part of that, part of the KOLs are all part of that in the social media channels,
Yeah.
but it's only a small part of that.
Your thoughts on LinkedIn as from a B2B perspective? What are your thoughts on that as a medium of communication? What are the maybe three, four things you feel founders should keep in mind when looking at LinkedIn as a communications platform?
I think it's important to keep a regular flow of announcements. I mean, that's always what works when you're talking to an audience. You're cultivating an audience, you're educating people, and you're keeping investors and partners informed of what your business is doing. Um, Also, the old school approach of case studies,
Yeah,
opinion pieces, these are tools we've used alongside press releases, we've used for decades,
sure.
and they're still valid, and they can be shared through LinkedIn. It's another channel to share it to your marketplace. So still remain very important.
And just coming back to that point you made about
Mhm.
regular announcements, right?
Yes.
What is battled with this and always battled for founders about, it almost becomes like when you are a founder or a co-founder, your initial days, you're just obsessed with solving an idea.
Mhm.
Ideally should be, right?
Mhm. Yes.
If
Yes.
you're completely focused on that.
Yes.
And then as you start going for your first fundraise and
Mhm.
marketing, your role starts moving a little bit more towards, external relationships, messaging,
Yes.
etc. And the core product may not necessarily have the same amount of
Focus.
focus.
Mhm.
So how do you balance how does a founder balance that? That's number one.
It's a
The
good
second
question.
thing was on that announcement conversation. I mean, when your focus becomes on regular announcements,
Mm.
the element of newsworthiness, right? We often asked, is this newsworthy whenever
Mhm.
we're trying to do a PR press release, you're
Right.
paid or otherwise, right?
Yes.
Is it newsworthy? And so, what would be your take on what kind of announcement would attract the right audience
Mhm.
or is important for your audience, plus
Well,
also the other question on focuses.
It's a very interesting area because this goes to the point of where should the entrepreneur, the founder, the CEO maintain his focus.
Yeah.
And you're right, a founder does need to focus on external audiences, but it's quite possible to get too obsessed, if you like, with the messaging and spend too much time on press releases and move your focus away from making the business move forward. From my point of view, I believe that the founder should always focus on the business, growing the business. Communications, yes, but the founder, the CEO, only needs to direct the communications process, kick off the initial messaging, and then oversee it in a hands-off way to make sure it stays on track. He or she shouldn't become too focused on managing press release announcements time after time after time, because you need to have a small team to do that.
Yeah.
You must delegate that task. The other point about press releases is that actually these days they're so easy to issue that journalists see far too many of them.
Yes.
And it's like having a pile of paper on your desk, but now it's a full email inbox.
Yeah.
And half the time, the journalists will never see those press releases. So I don't recommend to focus too much time on that. Yes, you need partner announcements, you need new product announcements, you need to show the world that you're keeping going, developing your business, and having a flow of announcements. But many of those are really for corporate benefit. Put on the website, keep a stack of them on a portion of the website and share them out, but don't expect journalists to follow them all up. And when you have an external PR team which has an objective view of this, they can decide which messages they really want to focus on, or perhaps package several together, and then talk to journalists about what are the key news stories behind the announcements. And that's what drives the news. That's what drives the opportunities.
And I think to your point on having external help, I think that the different stages startups go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
A is when you're tight on budget, you want to keep your team small, highly operational.
Yes.
Developers and key business persons. You don't have the bandwidth to, or both budget-wise, but also time-wise, to have a full-time PR person occupied. And I think, but on the other hand, you may not have a budget for an agency, and I think that's where what we call now the fractional CXOs as such, but fractional PR officer could be very useful, and that's one of the places where you come in. But what would you say is so A is how best to use fractional resources, but in particular communications and PR, and when does that need to become move into a full-time in-house person, and how do they maximize that?
I would say there's no definitive guide.
Sure.
Just in general terms, I would say it's a good idea to outsource. As a CEO, as I said before, you need to focus on driving the business forward. You can't do everything yourself, but you need to maintain a communications flow. So the best way to do that is to have somebody on a part-time basis, especially when you're an early stage startup, who can handle this process, which is time-consuming, and they will work on pitching the story to the core media. When you're a startup, then you're going to work with vertical market media and local media.
Correct.
It's common sense, right? Those are the people that will want to hear your story. Your PR person will understand the business, will know the media contacts, and can do the pitching. He or she can handle that process for you. Fairly straightforward. Can also write the press releases, prepare messages, and oversee interviews and make the job easy for you. As the business grows and you have to work more on your own media, prepare a better website, do more newsletters, work with customers and partners, then you'll need somebody in-house in a marketing and communications role who can then also work with the PR agency as a team. And you can expand that department as necessary growing up. But that's a natural evolution, and it's the same process it's always been. When it comes to PR, media relations, you absolutely need to have a couple of things. You need to have somebody that really knows your business and can explain it to people like journalists often don't know enough in your sector.
Yeah.
And secondly, they need to know the media marketplace very well, both locally, on a regional perspective, and in terms of the areas of business that we're talking about here, the Web3 business, the fintech marketplace, and also business and broadcast media. So there's a number of different sectors that you can work with an enterprising, committed communications person to make it work. Now, you don't need necessarily a large-scale, all singing and dancing PR communications agency for this. Their budgets, frankly, are often quite high.
Yeah.
The costs are high, and as a startup, it doesn't match necessarily your budget level. So you've got to be very careful about the kind of person you choose to work with you on this.
Yeah, I think it's vitally important, right? Because it's not just a short-term thing. It's a relationship. They become from being your primary person to being the guide for your internal team as things grow, right? And that one thing that's a relationship from a company to the PR perspective, but in general, relationships that a PR agency has with the various media and communication channels and persons there, right? Which you as an individual or a company may not necessarily have. And I think that can play quite a bit of a role in prioritizing from that inbox stack, which what is going to be flagged and
yes, of course,
what's not going to be prioritized. Right?
Absolutely, very important. I mean, I know the media market pretty well, having worked in it for 20 odd years, but it's always changing, and the individuals change, the media change, and now with fintech and Web3 being such an exciting sector, we're seeing a whole new array of online startups, and you don't know which are going to become the strongest. Obviously, today, Cointelegraph, CoinDesk, Cryptonomist, Decrypt, The Block, these are the biggest names.
Yeah.
But others are coming up all the time. You don't know next year, the year after.
Sure.
You'll have to have a broader focus. And interestingly, with fintech, as opposed to Web3, with fintech, we're looking at actually a lot of traditional finance media, like Finance Asia.
Like even the Bloombergs and the FTs of the world, right?
Of course. And also payments and media based in the UK, which we're starting to find are showing interest in the Web3 world. A lot of traditional finance media have been very hands-off and skeptical for quite a long time. But now that BlackRock and others are jumping on board, even the Financial Times is starting to show a more positive perspective, despite their skepticism.
Correct. I think the distinction of blockchainification of finance versus financification of Web3 in some senses, because you're talking about use of a technology for what is traditional financial products and services, and maybe evolving, but largely regulated, big name institutions or well understood products in the space, which is different to a completely DeFi channel for doing staking and something else, which is on decentralized exchanges, as an example. The other thing I just wanted to bring up was on storytelling.
Yes.
Right? This is a challenge that everybody faces. I don't think it's just founders. It's even CEOs of big firms telling a story. But in startups, I think there's a significant portion of startups who are multi-founders. We're using that term very loosely, right? Co-founders, so 2 or 3 persons to startup. Very rarely do you have solo founders. I think the portion is not as large. Eventually, one becomes a dominant founder, maybe later on. But how do you balance as co-founders? Let's just say for 2 people, right? Let's go with that example. 2-person startup. How do you balance storytelling and consistency? Or do you go, I will talk about technology, you're the person to talk about business model? Do you split duties? I know it's down to personalities of individuals as well, but maybe start at the top saying, how do you approach it? And let's assume one is an introvert and one is an extrovert.
Yes.
And one is a business guy and one is a technology lady. How would you do that?
I don't think there's any rule to manage that process. It's always a challenge. And even with a company like Animoca Brands, where you have a founder who is renowned throughout the industry as someone worth listening to, Yat Su, even with a company like that, there are other people involved in the management process. There are other points of view. And so we have to look to see what the opportunities are there. And so today, still talks about his vision and perspective, but the company is much larger now, and they have other senior management with a lot of skills and a lot of knowledge to share. So Evan Au Young, company president, talks about stablecoin and about the business aspect, the financial sector, and so real world assets. These are topics he can address very clearly and effectively. So we're able to look for separate opportunities for him. And then there are other managers who deal with cultural aspects. So Alan Lau, for example, is very much in the cultural area. And we are looking at real world assets today, which are being tokenized. For example, the Princess Katerina violin is now a project, and there's going to be a concert in Korea next week, I think. And there's going to be a talk there about the fractionalization of the violin, so that investors can actually buy a small portion of it, and also potentially musicians can hopefully have access to it, to actually play it if they own a fraction of it. The potential is fantastic. And at the moment, it's a case study to show the potential for fractionalization on the blockchain of various real world assets. A great story and an example of a case study that we can use for Animoca brands to deliver to various media, and either Yat or Evan or potentially Alan can talk about this. And so in terms of managing the message, I'm being a bit long-winded here.
No,
but in terms of managing the message and looking at spokespeople, we have to just manage the process, see what works best, and follow a careful direction that the company's message wants to follow. Now, for smaller startups, you have a similar situation, but on a more compact basis. You have to decide what is the core message. And actually, as a founder, every founder knows what sales pitch works for raising money, for finding customers, for signing up partners. So the founder knows what the key message should be. Whether there are more founders involved, they may have a different perspective, but essentially they all need to buy into the same core message. Otherwise, the company isn't coherent.
Fair.
And I, as a PR consultant, as a communications consultant, I will help these key people to follow that track and then encourage them. So that's part of my role, to keep it on the right path, gently, smoothly, and without pushing them to do something they don't want to do. So it's a process of careful management to make it work well.
I'll take it one step further, maybe, is when I wouldn't say conflict, but there is conflict as well between founders, but there tends to be a lot of disagreements as well on what should be a priority and what should be pushed through. So one may say, let's talk about the business, and one may say, let's talk about technology as an example, right? Or one may say, no, let's just talk about the industry, because that's where we can plug ourselves in. How do you reconcile as a communications expert on that messaging? How would you bring them to the table? I mean, this is not about advising them. It's not about therapy for founders, though I think a lot of us need quite a bit of it. But generally speaking, what would you say would be not necessarily a rule, but an approach?
Yeah, I think there's always room for compromise. And despite founders having different points of view, at the end of the day, they can put their own individual spin on the core message, but it's still the core message. It may be for a different audience. It may be either for the business media, the finance, fintech, or Web3, but still, it's all about the business message spun from a different angle.
Okay. Look, this has been very, very interesting, Mark, and I think very helpful for our both startups, but also mature for our companies to understand on messaging, and especially for communications expert. Before we close, I do want to bring in about balance in life, right? And it's a lot about what we do as founders and as people who are involved in ecosystems and industries which are literally 24/7 in case of blockchain, right? I know you're an avid cyclist, and you stay in a very nice part of Hong Kong. Would love to hear about how you got into cycling and how in Hong Kong, where most people think it's a very urban, dense, hectic place, you manage to keep yourself sane and as well as cycle. What's your? I would end with what would be your favorite cycling spot in Hong Kong?
Okay, okay.
So start from the
Well, I'm lucky enough to
balance.
live out in the New Territories,
Yeah.
near Sai Kung, between Sai Kung and Ma'anshan. And out there, we have less traffic and a lot of cycling paths.
Sure.
We also have a good number of roads up the big hills of the New Territories, which are very, very quiet. Some are gravel roads, some are mountain bike trails, and some are real roads. And so there are tremendous opportunities for cycling in the New Territories. It's much easier to cycle there than it is on Hong Kong Island. And I love just to set off from home and not even have a plan where I'm going to go.
Okay.
And then just turn left or right and keep going. And I have a mind map of all the locations. So I know what I can do, whichever direction I go in. And it's a sense of adventure that I really enjoy. I don't like to overplan. I like just to feel that sense of freedom. And although Hong Kong isn't massive, you can very easily ride for 100 kilometers without going over the same trail. And it's tremendous. And actually, you can now cross to China much more easily because they've got easy access with the new non-visa scheme. And you can travel 100, 150K along the Shenzhen Riviera, as we call it. So there's tremendous potential. Hong Kong has great opportunities, and there's a lot to offer visitors as well as residents. You don't have to fly overseas to enjoy yourself.
And that's the messaging for Hong Kong as well. It's a beautiful place, as you said. You have, I mean, there's 100 kilometers of mountain trails, with Necklace Trail as well, which people go for long runs and trails. Beyond the fact that 60 to 70% of Hong Kong is either national parks or mountain peaks, right? And stunning beaches across dozens of islands.
That's right.
And so, yeah, on that note, it's been a pleasure. We've both been here. We love our piece of Hong Kong's balance, as it were, with the hectic this thing. And I feel it's about finding the right balance for a lot of people. If you look properly, you'll find it. And in messaging, it's also about look hard enough. You will, wide enough, you will find it. So,
there's always a solution.
There's always a solution. On that note, thank you once again, Mark, for
Musheer,
having joined us. Audience, this was Mark Leeper, founder and managing director of Matrix Communication, helping us through understanding communication and the PR world for technology companies, changing the way the world is moving in the present and the future. Stay tuned for more such conversations on FinStep Asia's channel. We are getting close to our 50,000th subscribers soon. We've had over 1 million views this year, so we look forward to your continued patronage and touching base soon.